Hello and welcome to my channel. So today I am making a card for the Lawn Fawn Fanatics challenge, which is inspired by a movie, a song, etc. And I decided to do something along the theme of Puff the Magic Dragon. So you saw before that I had the Critters Ever After stamp set, and it just inspired me to make something with Puff, which is a story that my daughter loves. So I'm using my Lawn Fawn jet black ink here to stamp them down because I am going to color them. And of course, this is Copic friendly ink. So I'm trying to get a nice good stamp down for the dragon image and the little, what's supposed to be fire, but I'm going to make it look like smoke, for Puff, the magic dragon. So, and I also apologize for my lighting here. My sun light was going in and out as I was filming this, so you're going to see things get bright and then dark and then bright and then dark, so I apologize for that. And so with this background, I also wanted to use the amazing cloud stencils. But with Puff, it's kind of a sad story. He's lost his little boy and he's sad and alone. So for these clouds, I wanted to go with something kind of dark, so a little stormy. So I'm using the grays here, and I'm starting with the lighter color here, and it's not, as I go along, I kind of discover that it's not putting down a lot of color, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I have, both the dark and the light inks here. But as I go along, I'm kind of trying to figure out if it's actually laying down any ink here. So I end up going back and forth between the darker and the lighter. And I think even though the light doesn't show up so much, it does give this nice little, it kind of tones down the white of the cardstock. And I am using the Nina Solar White cardstock here. And you can see that the darker one, definitely a lot darker. I realized a little later that I might have been heavy-handed from the previous gray. So it's a little dark, but with what I'm going to do here, which I'm going to lay some vellum over this, so I'm not super concerned with any of the harsh lines. In fact, I think they might play to my benefit so that they'll show up a little better behind the gauzy type look of the vellum here. So I'm going along and again just kind of getting that light wash in with the lighter color, and I eventually get a little less heavy-handed with the darker one, but yeah, I kind of can't help myself going between the super light and the much darker one here. And I have to say that I really do love this stencil, and I love any excuse that I can find to use this stencil, whether it be for a background or, just to dress up an envelope or anything. I really do love this cloud stencil. And when I first saw it, when they were introducing it at Creativation, and I saw it on Instagram, I just immediately knew I had to have this stencil. So you can see here on the side, on the top right, I kind of missed a little bit of area there. It looks a little funny, but I'm actually going to have a frame around this, which is, I want to say about an inch wide. So I'm not super concerned with my side areas because of the fact that, I'm going to have this frame around it. So it doesn't have to look super clean. And again, like I mentioned with the vellum, I think a lot of this will get hidden away. And I'm just kind of making my way through on this. And this card, honestly, it's a little sad, and I think it's sadder than I had meant for it to be when I first started and I was first planning out what this card was going to look like. Because when I was choosing colors, which you'll see me later when I'm coloring Puff, it's got this great green and purple, these great colors. But then the card itself in the end is kind of sad because, again, he loses, the little boy grows up and isn't his his childhood friend, is gone. And it's really kind of sad. So not quite the happy-go-lucky, sunshine, exciting card that I would normally make, but at the same time, I think this type of card is an important type of card to make because not every card is going to be super happy. In some cases, you might be, making a card for someone who's lost somebody or is maybe just, a hard time of the year. So not every card is going to be super cheerful necessarily, and it may be just you working through something. So here I go ahead and I start coloring. I will say I am not the most skilled at coloring. I am still learning. I am learning a lot. I'm still working towards getting better at coloring. I do have my sheets with my combos that I've tried out and everything, all labeled. And when I picked my colors, I tried to choose from that list of colors, the combinations that I had to, try and find just the right greens and purples and such for the dragon. But for some reason, this particular dragon, I'm not great at shading. And I have, I've gone back and forth between whether or not I should maybe be doing like the 2-color shading and not going, trying to go for the 3-color shading. And as you watch me here, attempt to color this, you'll see a lot of back and forth. I am super grateful that this cardstock does not pill under what must have been layers and layers of the Copic markers that I put trying to get the color on this dragon right. The blending I'm still a little challenged by. But, I'm continuing to work and continuing to play, and I'm hoping eventually I'll get the hang of it. I watch videos or what have you. So, as I mentioned, the coloring here isn't going to be too exciting. But if you want to stick around and watch me struggle through this, feel free. Otherwise, I wouldn't blame you for jumping ahead to seeing the rest of the card. So now we're back with the rest of the card, and I went ahead and pre-cut these pieces out with the Rolling Hills die for my ocean. I just kind of tilted them at different directions to kind of get, a different feel each time. And you can see I've got my vellum, and I've got one piece of ocean that I'm putting in the back behind the vellum, and then I've got another piece of what's supposed to be ocean and a little bit of ground, little place for Puff to stand on there. And you can see I've got my gray frame there, and I'm just kind of trying to frame to see exactly where I want to place everything. And he will eventually be behind everything as well. He's not going to stick out there. So I'm just kind of getting situated, getting my very first piece of the ocean on there. And in all fairness, I'm really kind of eyeballing it. Now, one thing I did learn about the liquid adhesive and when you have the stitched borders is to stay away from the stitched borders, because I found that it made them kind of soggy if I got the glue too close. So I made sure to go below those borders. In fact, I even had one kind of rip on me as I was moving it around. So that's a hot tip there. Now, one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to stamp on the cloud background with the Miss You sentiment that I had actually got from a Gina K set that I have. So I wanted to put that kind of off, still inside the frame area. That's why I've got the frame there. And so it's going to be behind the vellum, just this very light kind of gauzy Miss You in the back. Now, when I was originally, putting everything together, I'm making sure that everything's still in place. I start to ink up the stamp, and then how you get a little bit of ink kind of on the board there. I'm kind of stopping myself because I'm like, wait a second, I don't want to get it on the gray there. And so I'm wiping to clean it up. But in all fairness, I could have just removed the frame at this point. I knew where everything was going. And in fact, when I go to do the second stamp, I do go ahead and remove the frame because I just needed it there originally for positioning, and I didn't want to take the chance on, getting it, getting this far along and then getting ink on the frame. So I wanted to ink this multiple times because I really wanted to try to be bold, to stand out when it is behind the vellum here. So I've got a couple there, and you can see me kind of testing to see if it's, visible. Because one of the concerns I did have at first was if you could even read it at all. And at one point I had tested putting it directly on the vellum, and it just bled in the vellum. So it didn't look great. So, I think this worked out well with the double stamping, and with the fact that the Lawn Fawn ink is a pretty nice deep ink. And I know I'm committing like a crafting sin here. I am putting the adhesive tape directly onto vellum, and yes, I know it 100% is going to show, but the nice part about that big, thick frame that's going around is I can hide so much adhesive behind that frame. So I didn't have to worry about it at all. Of course, I did get it on my glass mat there, but it rubs right off, thankfully. So I've got that first portion down where I've got the clouds and the far off waves in the back, and then I've got my waves for the forefront there. And as I'm laying this together, I'm still trying to figure out where I'm going to have my dimension, what's going to be popped up and what's going to be in the back. So I do spend a lot of time fidgeting with this. A lot more time than I expected to spend fidgeting. And, you know, in the end, I really just kind of eyeball things. So I can't even say for sure why I spend so much time fidgeting when in the end I just kind of slapped it on and said good enough. Now this is one of the more messy cards I've made because of all the layers and having to go back and kind of cut and trim everything off as I was placing everything. So that was kind of a first for me. You know, in putting this card together, it looks like a disaster. There's all of these pieces, you know, sticking out left and right. I wasn't even sure it was going to come together, in all fairness, as I'm, you know, putting all these pieces in place. But I think it turned out fairly well. And then, of course, this little neat trick, I was super proud of myself for this one, because I kept bringing that frame back. And I was like, well, why don't I just hinge it on there? That way I can really quickly look to see where things line up and just, you know, put it back. So, you know, I felt like that brilliant stroke of genius of hinging that on. Of course, I wanted to be really careful and make sure that it was a super light tack purple tape because, you know, what the worst part would be if I had set all this up and was getting ready to put everything down and then ripped it trying to get that purple tape off. So yeah, I mean, this card's really looking like a hot mess at this point. So I get the scissors out and I start trimming, and even in the video, I end up later doing even more trimming after the fact because there's a lot of layers, a lot of stuff going on with this one that was kind of all over the place. And trying to get everything even was just kind of a pain. But, you know, that's kind of the price of having these, you know, different layers at different angles and everything is you're going to have a little bit of a mess there. So I've got Puff, and as much as, you know, I'm still working on my blending and everything, you know, I thought he turned out pretty well. You know, I'm feeling pretty good about him. And I decided that I was going to pop him up on some foam tape to give a little bit of depth. I had considered popping up the hill he was on, or even the, you know, the wave in the back along with the hill. But what I ended up deciding in the end was I really do want him to be the focal point. It's part of the reason for selecting such muted colors, is to, you know, really make sure that he stands out. So I decided it would be best to just kind of puff him out. So you can see I'm setting him back there behind the frame. And in the end, you'll see later, I'm gonna you know, I'm gonna put foam behind the frame too. So that whole section is going to stand out, because that would have been kind of awkward if he had been dimensional and his little puff of smoke, which I couldn't decide if I wanted in front or in back, and you know, I go back and forth. And the nice part is where it's positioned, it's not a big deal. I can just, you know, push it back. So, and I think at one point you'll see me push it behind, but again, you know, with the dimension on him, you know, I was definitely going to need to use foam tape on this frame here. So yeah, I just got the just the regular foam tape here. I thought this would be better, a little more sturdy, also hide a little bit more than trying to put a bunch of like foam squares around. This just seemed like an easier solution here. And I feel like I got pretty lucky that I cut them just in the right spot, so they both pieces when I cut the piece in half were smaller than the frame, because I was a little nervous that my, you know, measuring would be a little bit off, and when I cut them, like one of them would be kind of sticking out of either like the inside of the frame or or what have you as I stuck them down. So, but it turned out pretty well. So I was able to get those in place. And then that gives me like just that little extra dimension where I almost felt like you were looking into the fairy tale land of Puff. Of course, I'm trying to sing the song in my head to remember like where he's from. Honolulu or something like that, I think is the place. So yeah, I like the idea of the light frame kind of making you feel like you're peeking in on poor sad Puff the Magic Dragon here. And that foam tape was not sticking and did not want to come off, and so I was having a little bit of a struggle with that. But I do eventually get it off. It just did not want to come off. So yeah, no, I get everything kind of smoothed down and together there. Like I said, off camera, I actually cut it a little better than that. And then there you have it. I have my Puff the Magic Dragon. I just wanted to add, of course, a little bit of bling here. So I am doing some sparkles here. Funny enough is at the time I decided not to put any little crystals, but the next day I did, which you'll see in the photo later. I absolutely ended up adding crystals. So for now, that's the finished card. Like I said, I do make some alterations later. And here you have it, the finished card, bling and all.